apologizes to Clarissa Shields after she defended Papoose.
Listen, I love the perfume. I love it. I'm talking about some of the best on the market. Sweet, like a...
There's a very specific sound the internet makes when it changes its mind dot. It's not loud at first. It's not trending immediately. It doesn't come with headlines or breaking news alerts dot. It starts quietly dot in comment sections, in reaction videos. In subtle shifts of tone, that sound is doubt. And once doubt enters a narrative, nothing stays the same again. That's exactly how this story began. Not with a scandal. Not with accusations. Not with proof dot, but with emotion. And in the digital age, emotion moves faster than facts ever could. For a long time, Papoose occupied a very specific space in public culture. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. He didn't dominate headlines. He didn't overshare. In an industry defined by chaos, controversy, and constant visibility, his restraint became part of his identity. People used words like solid, quiet, different. That image didn't come from one interview or one moment. It was built slowly over years through absence rather than presence, through what people didn't see as much as what they did. And that's why, when the internet finally started looking at him differently, the shift felt jarring, because this wasn't a fall from controversy dot, this was a fall from expectation dot. At the center of that shift stood Clarissa Shields, a woman whose public image couldn't be more different in structure, yet similar in credibility. Known for discipline, focus, and emotional honesty, Clarissa Shields wasn't someone audiences associated with mess or manipulation. Her reputation was built on effort, not performance dot. So when she spoke, not loudly, not aggressively, but vulnerably, people listened, and more importantly, they believed her tone. She didn't sound like someone chasing attention. She didn't sound like someone playing a role. She didn't sound like someone staging drama. She sounded like someone processing disappointment in real time. That's when the internet leaned in, because viewers recognized that voice. The voice of someone who gave emotional trust before realizing clarity was missing. That voice doesn't accuse. It reflects dot, and reflection is dangerous, because it invites others to see themselves in the story dot. As Clarissa Shields expressed her feelings, something subtle happened online. The conversation didn't immediately turn hostile toward Papoose. Instead, it became. Curious dot questions began circulating. Why does this feel unresolved? Why does this feel emotionally uneven? Why does one side sound open while the other remains distant? No one was declaring guilt. No one was making legal claims, but people were sensing. Imbalance dot, and imbalance is the birthplace of narrative shifts. That's when silence entered the spotlight dot, not the silence of absence, but the silence of response. Papoose didn't erupt. He didn't clap back. He didn't flood social media with explanations. He stayed quiet. And while silence can be dignity in real life, online it becomes a canvas. People paint meaning onto it. Some interpreted restraint. Others interpreted avoidance. Some saw maturity. Others saw emotional distance. None of these interpretations were facts, but once interpretations exist, they multiplied dot. Meanwhile, timelines became conversation pieces dot, not evidence. Not accusations dot, just observations. Public moments. Mentions of holidays. Casual references people remembered differently once emotions were involved. Again, nothing illegal. Nothing confirmed, but enough for curiosity to deepen dot, and curiosity feeds algorithms. That's when 50 CENT entered the narrative, not as an authority, not as a judge, but as a master of timing. His involvement didn't come in the form of statements or explanations. It came through amplification, edited visuals, stylized clips, captions that framed moments as commentary rather than claims. He never said, "This is the truth." He said, "This is what people are reacting to." And that distinction matters because it allows content to spread without crossing legal or ethical lines. It invites interpretation without owning conclusions. The internet debated his intent. Was it trolling? Was it satire? Was it narrative control? That debate itself kept the story alive. Every time momentum slowed, something reignited attention. Every time discussion drifted, another post redirected it. And while the noise grew louder, Clarissa Shields remained emotionally consistent. She didn't escalate. She didn't dramatize. She didn't attack. She simply existed within the conversation. That consistency worked in her favor. Audiences don't always side with who is loudest. They side with who feels most real. And real doesn't shout. Real reflects. As reaction channels entered the conversation, the framing shifted again. The story stopped being about what happened and started becoming about why this feels familiar. People weren't debating facts. They were sharing experiences, moments, where emotional investment wasn't matched with clarity. Situations where silence created confusion. Relationships where trust was given before understanding was complete. That's when the story stopped being celebrity drama. It became relatable. And relatability is more powerful than scandal. Blogs picked it up carefully, not with accusations, not with declarations, but with language like fans are questioning, social media is reacting, online narratives are shifting, safe words, strategic words, words that allow discussion without responsibility for outcome. By this point, Papoose wasn't being accused of wrongdoing. He was being reinterpreted. And reinterpretation is often more damaging than accusation because it doesn't need proof. It only needs repetition. As part one comes to a close, one thing became undeniable. This wasn't about truth or lies. It was about perception. And perception, once activated, doesn't wait for confirmation. It moves. Once a story reaches this stage online, it no longer belongs to the people inside it. It belongs to the audience. And audiences don't wait for clarification. They wait for confirmation of their feelings. That's what changed everything. At this point, the conversation around Papoose stopped being about what he did or didn't do. It became about how people felt watching the situation unfold. And feelings don't require evidence, they require resonance. That resonance came from contrast. On one side, Clarissa Shields continued to show emotional clarity without escalation. She didn't flood timelines. She didn't issue threats. She didn't demand public loyalty. Her tones stayed measured, reflective, and personal. That mattered. Because in moments of public tension, people subconsciously assign roles. Not because they're fair, but because stories need structure. And the structure the internet began assigning was clear. Clarissa Shields became the symbol of emotional honesty. Papoose became the symbol of emotional distance. And 50 Cent became the symbol of narrative control. Not because anyone declared it, but because repetition made it feel true. As the days passed, reaction content shifted from speculation to analysis. Creators weren't asking what happened anymore. They were asking why this reaction feels so intense. And that's where psychology entered the chat. People started discussing emotional labor. They talked about imbalance in relationships. They shared stories where one person gave vulnerability while the other offered ambiguity. Suddenly, the situation wasn't about celebrities. It was about patterns. And patterns are powerful because they make individuals interchangeable. At that point, Papoose wasn't being judged as himself. He was being judged as a role people recognized. The quiet one, the unbothered one, the one who doesn't explain. In real life, those traits can signal maturity. Online, they can signal detachment. And detachment, when paired with someone else's visible emotion, almost always loses public sympathy. This is where silence became the defining factor, not because silence is wrong, but because silence allows others to speak for you. And that's exactly what happened. Commentators filled the gaps. Reaction channels interpreted pauses. Viewers projected meaning onto absence. Some defended Papoose, arguing that restraint is wisdom. Others questioned why clarity wasn't offered when confusion was clearly growing. Neither side had proof, but both sides had conviction. And conviction fuels engagement. Meanwhile, 50Cent continued doing what he's always done best, staying one step removed while remaining central. He didn't escalate language. He didn't claim insider knowledge. He didn't issue statements. Instead, he curated attention. Each post felt deliberate. Each caption felt timed. Each visual felt designed to provoke reaction rather than conclusion. That's an important distinction, because provoking reaction keeps content alive without creating responsibility. And responsibility is what most public figures try to avoid. By now, the situation had reached a point of no return. Even if Papoose had spoken immediately, the narrative wouldn't have reset. It would have shifted, but not erased. That's the hidden danger of online momentum. Once the internet decides a story is about how something feels, facts become secondary. People aren't asking, is this true? They're asking, does this make sense emotionally? And emotionally, the story made sense to too many people. That's why defenses struggled. Any attempt to downplay the situation felt dismissive. Any attempt to redirect attention felt evasive. Any attempt to stay silent felt strategic. No move felt neutral anymore. This is the trap of perception. When you don't control the narrative early, every option later feels wrong. As the discussion matured, something else happened. The internet stopped demanding answers. It started expecting outcomes. Would Papoose eventually speak? Would there be acknowledgement? Would there be distance? Would there be reconciliation? Speculation replaced curiosity, and speculation is far more dangerous, because speculation writes future chapters without consent. For Clarissa Shields, the conversation evolved differently. She became less of a participant and more of a reference point. Her words were quoted. Her tone was analyzed. Her restraint was praised, not because she tried to be symbolic, but because people needed a symbol and she fit the role. Someone who appeared emotionally open. Someone who didn't weaponize pain. Someone who didn't rush to dominate the narrative. That perceived dignity became her shield. The more chaotic the conversation grew, the more her calmness stood out, and contrast creates loyalty. For Papoose, the challenge became visibility. Not fame. Not relevance, but emotional visibility. Audiences didn't need details. They wanted acknowledgement of the emotional imbalance they perceived. And because that acknowledgement didn't come clearly, the narrative hardened. Narratives are almost impossible to reverse. They don't need new information to survive. They just need memory, screenshots, clips, reactions. The internet archives everything. That's when analysts began framing the situation as a case study. Not of wrongdoing, but of narrative drift. How quickly public perception can shift when silence meets vulnerability. How easily an image built on restraint can be reinterpreted as avoidance. How dangerous it is to underestimate emotional storytelling, because emotional storytelling doesn't require villains. It requires contrast. And contrast was everywhere. Even defenders of Papoose found themselves explaining tone rather than facts. He's just private. He doesn't owe anyone an explanation. He's staying out of drama. All valid points, but none of them address the emotional hunger driving the conversation. And when emotion is the engine, logic doesn't slow it down. As time passed, the story didn't explode further. It settled into public memory. That's often worse than escalation. Escalation burns out. Settlement lingers. Now, whenever Papoose is mentioned, this moment exists alongside his name, not as an accusation, but as a question. Questions don't disappear easily. For Clarissa Shields, the moment became a pivot, not because she gained clout, but because she gained public alignment. People felt protective. They felt understanding. They felt seen through her experience. That kind of connection outlasts headlines. And for 50 Cent, The situation reinforced a familiar narrative that he understands attention better than most, that he knows when to enter, when to exit, and how to let others do the heavy lifting. He didn't need to win an argument. He needed to influence conversation, and that influence was undeniable. As weeks pass and the story quiets, one thing remains clear. This wasn't a scandal defined by facts. It was a moment defined by perception management. No courtrooms, no official statements, no definitive endings, just a shift. And shifts are powerful because they change how future actions are interpreted. The next silence won't be neutral. The next post won't be isolated. The next interaction will be filtered through memory. That's the cost of viral attention. Once you enter the public emotional economy, everything becomes symbolic. As audiences move on to the next trending topic, this story won't disappear. It will resurface in references, in comparisons, in remember when moments, because stories like this don't need conclusions. They become context. And context follows people quietly. In the end, this wasn't about betrayal in the traditional sense. It was about emotional alignment. Who the audience felt connected to, who felt distant, who felt in control. And in the digital age, feeling often outweighs truth. That's the uncomfortable reality of online storytelling. As the dust settles, viewers are left with reflection rather than resolution. What happens when silence speaks louder than words? What happens when emotion fills the gaps facts never reach? What happens when perception becomes permanent? Those questions don't trend. But they linger. And that's why this story mattered. Not because of what was proven, but because of what was felt.